My name is Amy Howard. Today I'm going to show you one of my favorite products, our Tuscana powder paint. Years ago I had the privilege of working in a bodega in Florence, Italy. And there I actually learned the processes of making paints from scratch, much like they have been for hundreds of years. So today I'm going to show you that process, and imagine it's like we're going to the grocery store to get paint. It's natural. I don't have to worry about wearing any gloves. It's not going to affect my skin if I'm asthmatic. None of that's going to be a problem because it's all natural and green. Because the Tuscana powder paint is all natural, it's not going to have the incredible adhering properties like the One Step. So it's going to be very important that I base coat my piece first in the One Step. So whatever color you're going to have that's going to show through, that's what you're going to base coat it in. So I love working on trim pieces. As a decorative artist for over 30 years, it allows me to be able to play with it. It allows me to be able to see what color compositions go well together. That way I can make a decision, and that's what I'm going to paint my piece in. Also, as a decorative artist, if you paint pieces for people, these are great to be able to show what it's going to look like as an end result. So with this particular piece, I've gone on and base coated it in the linen color of the One Step paint. It's dried about 20 or 30 minutes, and it's a beautiful matte chalky finish. Now, you can imagine going into an antique shop. We're shopping in Rome, maybe we're in Paul Bert, we're in the Paris flea market, and when you look at pieces of furniture that have a beautiful age to it, there's going to be a natural fissure cracking. This is totally unlike the cracked patina that we did before. This is a beautiful, very fine fissure crack. So in order to be able to do that, I've got to be able to mix it with some water, because you'll notice it comes in a dry state like this, and because it's all natural, it does have a shelf life. So I'm going to take just a little bit of it out, and it's a process of mixing 1 part water to 1 part legno gesso. Now, a lot of you may think, what is legno gesso? Legno in Italian stands for furniture. So this is a special furniture gesso. It primes the surface. It's going to give me this beautiful white chalky color when I go through to distress it, that's going to show through as well. So I've added 1 part legno gesso powder to 1 part water. I'm only going to mix up enough to be able to do the project, because it's only going to have shelf life for about 2 weeks. So you can put it in the refrigerator. Before you use it again though, I want you to make sure that it gets to a neutral room temperature before you use it. Make sure you stir it well. It's going to be the consistency of like really nice pancake batter. It's not going to have lumps in it. You don't want to paint with bubbles. So if you have a lot of them, it's going to be important that you just strain it with a little bit of cheesecloth into another container. So then I'm just going to apply, you're going to see that it's just a very nice white coat. I am going to make sure that I have 100% coverage. Because I've got a lot of detail on this, I'm going to make sure that I come back, I pounce down in here, and I thin it out. It may seem really watery and thin. That's good. That's very desirable. It's going to dry very opaque, so don't worry about trying to put on too much. If you put on too much, you could actually compromise the quality of your end result. So after my legno gesso has dried for about 15 or 20 minutes, it's going to be rock hard. I want to come back with a little bit of 400 sandpaper, 400 grit, and you see how I'm sanding it? It's kind of a hit drag, hit drag, hit drag, hit drag. I'm not sanding it like this. I don't want to get wear through. It's just to soften it, because it would have gotten really hard. And I'm going to come back with a China bristle brush. I want to dust away any residue that I might have gotten from sanding. Then I'm actually going to mix up my Tuscana powder paint. Now, it's going to dry down the same color as far as the final look as you see it in its raw state. So I'm going to take a little bit of my Tuscana powder paint, and it's mixed a ratio of 1 part water to 1 part Tuscana powder paint. This particular color is Noir, N-O-I-R. And again, it's going to be like thin pancake batter. I don't want any lumps. If I get foam, if I'm using a hand mixer, or maybe you can go to a thrift store. You can get a blender for about $2.50. You can measure it with the cups that comes in with the Tuscana powder paint. You're going to do, if you use the entire container of the powder paint, you're going to use the same amount in water. So it's 1 part water to 1 part powder paint. And the same rule goes with the legno gesso. You're going to have a shelf life of about 2 weeks, so you want to be sure and refrigerate it and then allow it to come to a room temperature before you use it. Because it's all natural and there's not an anti-separation agent in this, we're going to agitate our brush and make sure that our pigment and all the yummy ingredients at the bottom are stirred up every time we're getting ready to apply it onto our piece. So I'm agitating, making sure the pigment that would have fallen down in the bottom, that it's come back up into my brush. I'm going to offload. And I'm going to apply it to my piece. I'm overlapping each time. I do want 100% coverage. I don't want any holidays. Remember, holidays are the areas that we might neglect, and you'll easily see it on this piece because of the color value difference with the linen base coat of my one step and my Tuscana black. So see, that's a holiday. I want to come back and make sure that that's covered up really nicely. So I'm going to get 100% coverage, and it's going to go on thin. You're going to think, this doesn't feel like paint. It is. It's the way paint used to be made. So it's going to give me a nice coverage. Of course, the black is going to be a little bit easier. If you're working with a lighter color, you may have to put 2 coats on. It's going to be really important to make sure they're nice, thin coats. If we get it too heavy, if you've mixed up your paint and your ratio isn't 1 to 1 and it gets too heavy, it's not going to antique as natural as we're going to want it to. So this piece has dried. It took about 15 minutes, and you'll notice how it's drying. It's going to go back to the same color as it was when I mixed it up. So, and it's a beautiful dead chalky finish. Now I want to teach you something that you may not be familiar with, and this is a process that you can even use on our one-step paint, but it's called watermarking or fly specking. When you look at an antique piece, you're going to notice that there's little reticulation watermarks that are going to happen as part of the oxidation process with the paint finish. And I can replicate that very easily with my water-based antiquing glaze. So I'm going to dip it in here. I'm going to offload it because I want to have control over the reticulation. So you see kind of in a fanning action, even over here on my reticulation on my paper. Now, if I want to be able to get watermarks on my piece, when I'm doing Tuscana, it's very important that I do this first. Because what happens, this is a very matte, chalky finish. When I come and I create these reticulated little circles, it's going to seep down into the finish. So I've fly specced my antiquing glaze on my piece first before I'm going to do the actual antiquing of it where I'm wearing. This is going to allow those little reticulated circles to seep into the finish, and it's going to add another visual layering, which is going to make it look more authentic. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my seaweed sponge, I'm going to dip it into my antiquing glaze, offload it just a little bit, and I'm going to come in and I'm looking at composition the whole time. Now remember, when you're at this stage, you are going to have to work on a vertical surface. So I'm going to take the drawer out of my piece, I'm going to lay it down. If I'm working on a larger piece, I'm going to lay it on its side to work on it. I can't work upwards because it's going to drip and it's not going to look natural. So I'm going to decide where it is this piece is actually going to be getting some wear. And I use the terminology a pass because I'm coming over the entire piece or the area that I'm working on. To where it's saturated. That's what I call a pass of my antiquing glaze. Once I've done that, I'm going to let it sit for about 5 minutes. What it's doing is it's actually softening the finish. It's going to go down into it, down to my legno gesso, and it's going to allow me to start lifting it so where I can see my linen color of the one step, which is my base coat, through as wear. And I tell people part of the reason why I love the Tuscana so much is because when people want to get wear on a finish that they've done, or maybe even the one step, what do they use? They use a rotary sander, they use sandpaper. That's not natural. When it's very abrasive, and we use the joke of saying it looks like somebody's hooked it onto the back of a truck and they pulled it down the street, or it looks like a squirrel's chewed on it. That's not authentic. It's not something that you look like that was a piece of furniture that was an antique that someone cherished. So we want to make sure that this is very authentic looking. And one of the best ways is to train your eye. It's raising your level of connoisseurship. And when you study pictures of antiques and just that soft wear and that transition around a piece, or maybe around the escutcheons, or maybe the handles on the drawer, it's very, very soft. It's not abrasive. So you just want to be able to stand back to it and think, that piece was cherished. That piece has a history. It has a story to tell. That's what we're replicating with Tuscana. So in taking my antiquing glaze with my rag, after this pass is set there, I'm going to start coming back in where this piece would have worn, around the arms, around the back of the chair, maybe around the feet. And see how soft? I'm just barely wearing it. And then I'll come back with a dry part of my rag as if to blot it so I can see my progress in what's happening. Now you'll notice I didn't saturate my rag, and I'm not coming in a large way like this. It's very methodical. This is the part where this piece becomes artistic. This is where your ability to be able to understand oval eye track and composition is going to come in and be very, very important. And I would always suggest start out with just a little bit at first. Just don't come in and start rubbing it, because then you've got to go back. You can repaint it if you take off too much. Just dry it off. Come back and add another layer of your Noir Tuscana, and then proceed to this step. So I'm just going to take my time. The other great thing is, especially if I've got art or if I've got striping on my piece, I can wear that striping to where it looks like it really would have worn and been authentic. I love that. So my piece is completely dry. It took about 15 or 20 minutes. And the next step that I'm going to do is going to be my light antique wax. I'll take a China bristle brush, and it takes very, very little. I'm going to offload it. I always like to use like a cardboard palette, because if I come directly from the wax and I put it on my piece, it's just too much wax. You'll notice how I'm coming back, just constantly moving my brush around. I don't want it to be too heavy-handed, but this is a sealing process. The Tuscana is a lot different than the one-step paint. The one-step paint does not have to be sealed. With the Tuscana, I really do want you to seal it with wax. That's going to help protect the finish over a long period of time and from wear and tear. So I'm taking a little bit of my dark wax. I'm going to offload it again on my palette. And I do want to make sure that my light wax has dried a few minutes first. I do want to have my tack, because if I come back and add the dark wax, there again, I'm going to be getting a third color of wax, and I don't want that. So I'm going to come back in first. See the difference? See how bright this is? See how that kind of makes it a little bit more subtle? Especially if I'm going to be working with a lighter color. Maybe I've put the Toulouse Rose Tuscana on top of linen. It's going to look totally different. I want to make sure this is nice and dry. I don't want it to be greasy at all. I don't want it to be moving at all. And a lot of people might say, why are you doing this three-part process? The light wax actually acts as a ground to be able to accept the dark wax just around the edges. We should only think of the dark wax of being used about 10%. The dark wax is not to come back on top of everywhere, because otherwise you're just going to flatten your finish. It's not going to have the depth anymore visually. So you'll always notice I'm very liberal with my dust of ages. And I'm pouncing it because this piece has a lot of carving in it. I'm pouncing it and I'm getting it down into the crevices. If you want to keep a Tupperware container or a garbage can of something, you can offload some of it, put it back in the container, and be able to keep it and reuse it. Then I want to be able to use my lint-free rag. I love wash t-shirts. And you'll notice how I'm just going to come back and buff it. The reason for buffing it like a shoe is because this wax is going to give me a patina. It's going to give me a sheen that's very, very desirable. But at the same time, I don't want to get down in the crevices to buff it, because I want that dead matte finish that would have gotten on a piece of furniture over a period of time. And if I take off too much, I can just come back and add a little bit more. It's very forgiving. And it's all about layering to make it have that beautiful, authentic Toscana look. Wonderful. Now, when I've painted a piece of furniture, my friends will never know that I paid $15 for it. I spent a Saturday afternoon and I rescued it, and guess what? I get to enjoy the bragging rights.